from like 1993 to 1998, I was one of the healthiest, maybe the healthiest person on earth. It was crazy what was going on, absolutely berserk. And then things happen to you, tragedies happen in your life or something. And, that's part of the life process. And, you're also at that peak age. I was at that peak age. And so, if you've been through traumas and stuff, you can get yourself super healthy. But if you are like your age and you're doing what I'm saying, especially with the bowel cleansing and getting on the organic food and just stay on the superfoods and making sure you're getting sun every day and fitness, you could literally become the healthiest person in the world.
What's up, everybody? And on this very first episode of the Tap In Within podcast, we're introducing a world-renowned speaker, author, biodynamic organic farmer, earth activist, peak performance coach, and adventurer. His insights and discoveries in the world of health, natural beauty, and optimal nutrition have transformed the lives of millions. He's been appointed as the health coach of highly successful CEOs, Hollywood celebrities, and top-notch athletes such as Novak Djokovic. His Facebook page has amassed a following of over 12 million people, and he's hosted over 3,000 live events over his career, sharing the stage with personal growth leaders from the likes of Tony Robbins, Deepak Chopra, and John Gray. Our guest today, David Avocado Wolfe, was among the first visionaries to bring superfoods such as raw and organic cacao, goji berries, and maca extract into general distribution in North America. Among other feats, David has written best-selling books, been the spokesperson for the NutriBullet product, and has been widely recognized for his tagline and mentality of having the best day ever, every day. In this episode, we'll dive deep into the mysteries and benefits behind the little-known health food, cacao, amongst many others, the journey of our soul between irrationality and rationality, the peak health toolkit, achieving abundant energy and productivity, why parasites may be influencing your decision-making, and how to develop a winning mentality to turn your passions into highly successful businesses. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in today, and make sure to hit that subscribe button on this channel to keep getting empowering knowledge and wisdom from the world's leading thinkers. So without further ado, we present you the man who has been deemed the Indiana Jones of the superfood and longevity universe, David Avocado Wolfe. David Avocado Wolfe, how you doing, brother?
Dude, best ever. How are you?
It's the best day ever, huh? Talking here with one of my heroes.
I'm in one of your hoods right now, and I just left another one of your hoods, so California and Texas. So yeah. I'd spent a lot of time traveling all over America, but my business was always in California, and now I'm moving it to Texas, which I understand you're also from Texas, and I'm really excited about it. Very excited.
Yeah, I grew up in the Woodlands around that area, and
okay, that's where I'm at.
Much. Really, you're in the Woodlands?
Oh yeah. Oh. I'm actually right near Montgomery.
Oh wow. Okay, I don't remember
the Woodlands.
I was pretty young, but that's
okay.
Over there. It's amazing we had that coincidence.
Interesting. This is the best part of Texas, in my opinion. It's lots of lakes, lots of trees. It's forested. That whole forest that comes across the south from Georgia all the way across really ends at a line that's right about. It's somewhere between Montgomery and was it Bastrop? Somewhere in there. Those tall as a Georgia pine. That just ends right about right there. And then you go into the scrub desert of Austin and Dallas and that kind of thing. And most people think of Texas as being like a scrub desert, but this is the other side of it.
Yeah. So David, I think it's amazing. Well, should I call you Avocado? How are you? Just kidding.
I mean, I like going by, whatever is whatever the person wants to call me. But one of my favorite ways of being addressed is Avocado, because that is my love and passion for so long. I've been an avocado grower since 1978, dude.
Wow. So how did you get into it? Like, how did it become such a passion? How did you start farming even in that area we can begin with?
Some years ago, maybe it was a couple of years ago, I realized that I'd never actually told anybody this. Not even my brothers. Nobody actually knew this about me. I was the only one really who knew this. And that is when I was like very young, maybe 4 or 5 years old, I started renegade planting pine trees in my neighborhood in Seaside Heights, New Jersey, right there on the Jersey Shore, which is where I was born. And that's one of my earliest memories. In fact, I used to take these sprouted pine trees and transplant them over into these people's yards. Nobody even knew any of this was going on. And so, there's these things you get when you're born. You're born into certain habits and disciplines and patterns of behavior. And that was one of them. So when I got to California in 1977, we started planting my uncle's orchard up in eastern San Diego. And then eventually that led to me planting my first avocado tree in 1978. Yeah. And somehow it's just been there ever since. I'm really a tree planter. I love gardening, but that's not my real specialty. I'm not really strong at that. I'm really strong at fruit trees, which we call horticulture. Another word for that is horticulture. And I just stayed with it. And I really recommend for people, if you want a great joy in your life, to find some connection with growing plants and growing trees. Maybe it's, some people are really good at gardening. Some people are really good at growing tomatoes. Some people are really good at growing lettuce. Some people are really good at growing fruit trees. Some people are really good at growing ornamental trees. Whatever your thing is, try to find it when you're young, because that is your best meditation.
Yeah. And it's so interesting because I was listening to one of your interviews on London Real, and you said that one of the Terence McKenna quotes really sparked your interest into getting into all these superfoods. So you said that you're partly a nutritionist. That's one of your expertises. And you've said that it's very difficult to become a nutritionist if you've never actually been around the food. So what can you tell us about your experience growing these amazing exotic plants, seeds, nuts, fruits, etc.? How has that been and shifted your perspective for you?
Well, okay, let's get to that Terence McKenna quote, because it was something like, grow the plants, they're your gurus, and they'll teach you.
Yeah.
So I got that download from Terence McKenna back in the 90s. I was like, okay, I'm into plants. I'm into growing trees. I'm already a crazy planter anyway. I'm going all the way in. So I got into growing all the amazing psychoactive cacti. I got into growing ayahuasca. I got into growing cacao trees. I got into growing tobacco. I mean, I got into all the sacred plants around the world. I got into growing those, and I've grown those for, in a lot of cases, over 20 years. So what that does to you is profound. I mean, I'm the only nutritionist you're ever going to find in the world who actually grows everything I've talked about. I've grown grapefruits. I've grown lemons. I've grown oranges. I've grown avocados. I've grown Rollinia. I've grown cherimoyas. It just goes everything you can think of right down the list. I've grown quinoa. I've grown rice. I've grown wheat. You name it. I've grown it because that's just a love. I mean, if you're into nutrition, we live in a crazy world, bro. You know that. Like, how can a nutritionist be talking about food? They never grew it. How can we be in such a world? But yet that's the world that we're in.
Yeah. So one of the main foods that you really brought up to the public eye was the cacao. And right here, I have a little cacao drink with me just for this special occasion. Well, I actually fucking love cacao, which you really brought that to my eye. And I never thought of it as a health food. I never thought that it could have these benefits. But when you came across the cacao, what did you find? How was that journey for you?
Okay, so I used to go to Maui every year. This is back
Cheers.
It's getting back to 25 years ago. And the first time I went to Maui, dude pops out and he's like, here, and he gave me 3 cacao beans. And I was like, what are these? Because I had no idea, just like nobody knows where the chocolate actually comes from. It's actually, chocolate is the most widely eaten nut in the world that no one actually eats. We all eat a processed form of it, right? So the chocolate nut or cacao bean, it's truly a nut. It's like, imagine every day somebody came to you and they're like, oh, here's almond butter. And you're like, oh, okay, cool, almond butter. Then somebody came along and said like, here's almond oil. And you're like, oh, cool, almond oil. And people came along and were like, hey, here's crushed up almonds. You're like, oh, okay, cool. And then one day somebody shows up and goes, here's an actual almond. And you're like, I never, what do you mean an actual almond? That's what cacao is. That's how it hit me. We've all eaten a processed form of this food, which is the most revered food on earth. Chocolate is the most revered food on earth. We had no idea where it comes from, how it's grown, what the whole history of it is, none of it. And so it started for me, somebody gave me these cacao beans and I was like, what is it? And they're like, oh, it's just you just peel them and throw them into a smoothie. I had no idea it was connected with chocolate. I really didn't even know how chocolate was made, any of this stuff. Then eventually I started, coming to Maui, and then it was suddenly 10 cacao beans. We're peeling those, we're throwing those into smoothies. And then at some point, this is probably 1998, it was suddenly hundreds. And finally I was like, what is the deal? Like, what is this? And they're like, oh, this is like chocolate. Like all chocolate is made out of this nut. And I was like, really? And then the next one I peeled, instead of throwing it in the smoothie, I actually bit into it. Now, I'd been a raw foodist for years at that point. I had never had chocolate in over a decade, probably. I was completely against chocolate. And so I bit into this. Now, imagine being a raw foodist and trying all these raw foods. Eventually you start to run out of flavors. Yeah. You're like, let's have something different. When I bit into the flavor of that, I was like, oh my God, this exists. And the cacao god appeared, boom, like Gazoo and the Flintstones. And suddenly I got the download, and that went on for 24 hours straight. And it was a life-changing experience. And basically the cacao god said, if you want to affect the lives of millions of people, stick with the wheatgrass. But if you want to affect the lives of billions of people, you need to get on board with me. And I was like, whoa, okay, cool. Because chocolate affects the lives of billions of people. It's in the top 15 foods eaten by humans. That's crazy right there. Out of everything on earth, chocolate, coffee's in that list, wheat's in that list, potatoes in that list, coconuts in that list, and chocolate is in that list. It's really profound. Like rice, it's up, it's like billions of people eat it. And so I began, like I have always done in the nutrition world. I did this with olives originally. Like, how does it ripen naturally? How do you eat this thing off the tree? Like, what's the natural process? We deconstructed that because I was living in San Diego at that time for years and years. Recently connected with a friend of mine who was from that era. We connected on a call very recently. I hadn't seen him over 20 years. And, the olive naturally falls on the ground, and gradually through the rains and everything, it dries out around the roots of the tree. And then come January, February, you're able to go and pick up off the ground the ripe, actual real olive. It does it all naturally. You don't have to do any salting or brining or anything. Wow. So I was like, how does cacao work like this? And we began deconstructing it. I began growing it. And here we are 20 years later. And I have to tell you, there are so many things I've learned about cacao. There's so many mysteries left. There's so much there with chocolate that people have not experienced. And there's so many things I still don't know.
Mm-hmm. And what do we know now about cacao? What do we know now about its benefits?
Okay, well, it's a number one. It's probably olive oil and chocolate are the number 1 and 2 longevity foods for a human being. So I like seeing you drink that, because years down the road, when you're 80, you'll be able to drink that same drink and be like, okay, this is good for me. Let's stick with it.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not talking about the sugar, right? It's delicious. I'm not talking about the sugar and what they did to chocolate, which is eventually they turned it into a poison. I'm talking about what it really is, what it originally is, and what you're doing there, which is you're now taking the raw cacao powder, raw cacao beans, and you're blending it with superfoods, and you're making these wonderful smoothies, right? Yeah. That's like the real deal. And so when you start having that, you start to go, what's going on? Now, we know that chocolate turns on parts of our brain and turns off parts of our brain. So chocolate is very good for orators. I'm a speaker. I'm an orator. It's excellent. It's very good for readers. It's very good for studying. It's very good for focus. It's like coffee, right? But it's got a little bit more of a zany, magical energy than coffee has. And that's why we have like Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. There's a zany element, a psychoactive element. The whole psychedelic revolution of the 60s that led to now like people microdosing and all of that whole world of LSD and magic mushrooms and ayahuasca and all that stuff. It all began one night in, I'm going to say June 29th, June 30th, 1955, when Gordon Wasson and his wife Valentina went down to Huautla de Jimenez in Mexico to participate in a magic mushroom ritual, which they thought was all mythology until they found out it's still going on in Mexico. And they were served the magic mushroom by Maria Sabina, the great shamaness, in a chocolate drink.
Wow.
The whole thing was delivered, the whole psychedelic 60s and what was published in Life magazine, I think in 1958, could have been I think it was February 1958, if my memory serves me correctly, people can check up on it, was what brought then all these hippies and beatniks were like, what do you mean there's some magic? What? Let's go try this stuff out. And they all flooded down there to Oaxaca and went up into the mountains, the Zacatecas mountains that are over there, where Maria Sabina lived in Huautla de Jimenez up there in some little village, which is now a very famous village. And they're like, there's some psychoactive what we can eat? Huh? That puts you in touch with the spirit world, which is what it does. And anyway, but it was all brought by chocolate, all delivered by chocolate. And so chocolate has this zany psychoactive part that helps us to think differently. We had talked previously about, I think you're in your senior year at university. Is that
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Year.
So fourth year. So what's happening is you're finding out that people they lost their ability to think creatively, right?
Yeah.
Is that one of the things you're experiencing? Well, chocolate brings it back. Chocolate helps you get it back. It helps you to think differently, to think through problems differently. We don't need to know what to think. We need to know how to think. We need to get smarter in our creative thinking. This is really the future for all education. Our education got really dulled down into here, memorize this, here, memorize that, and then we're going to give you this piece of paper. But really what we should be learning is logical fallacies. Really what we should be learning is creative thinking, how to think through a problem differently. And chocolate, actually, if there's going to be any food that can help us do that, chocolate's it. By the way, a lot of times people ask me, I need to make more money. What food should I eat to make more money? Chocolate, of course. It's the golden ticket. What are you talking about? It's by far the best thing for prosperity that you could ever have. So that's another piece of the puzzle.
Yeah. And just for me to understand, and for our audience to understand, what are the exact properties of the cacao that make these connections, creative connections happen, or thinking differently? I know it's one of the world's top antioxidants. What does that really mean, and what other properties does it have?
Okay, so psychoactive qualities that cacao has is it's very high in phenethylamines, and phenethylamines influence our ability to focus and concentrate. It's also very high in theobromine versus caffeine. So theobromine is different. It's more of a cardiovascular stimulant than nervous system stimulant. So the caffeine's more nervous system, theobromine is more cardiovascular. That means that the chocolate actually is very good for the heart. When you couple that with the fact that chocolate is number one in terms of what mineral is present in chocolate that's very important for a human diet? It's magnesium. Chocolate's number one in magnesium of any major food in the world. Chocolate's very rich in zinc and copper. It's one of the highest in zinc and copper of any food in the world. Chocolate's extraordinarily high in chromium. That's why it's really good to mellow out your blood sugar and normalize your blood sugar with the chromium. Chocolate is crazy, maybe the highest of any commonly eaten food in iron.
Wow.
So in terms of nutrition and the density of minerals, and this is lab tested, Maxim Analytics in Toronto, my friend Ramiz Saeed had spent years sending me the data of chocolate he'd tested. Chocolate is in the top 6 most mineral rich foods in the world. So if we're looking at how do we actually express our genotype, how do we actually be healthier, one of the key things is make sure we have minerals, the minerals of the earth, things like iron, things like manganese, which is kind of iron's little brother, things like magnesium, which is the most mineral, it's the most important mineral, probably most important alkaline mineral for a human being for sure. And then we've got the zinc and copper. What else? There's other ones. What else can we say about, there's another one that I'm missing right now. It's not vanadium, but there's chromium. There's another one that's actually very high in chocolate. It's unusual, sulfur. So chocolate's reasonably high in sulfur, which is really good for connective tissue. This may feed into why it's a longevity substance, is because it's for a nut. It's probably stands alone. Here's another one. There's another one, phosphorus. So the alkaline magnesium with the phosphorus, those two together, to me as a nutritionist, means bone density. And it has been shown that chocolate eaters have better bone density and they have less bone fractures, especially with age. Because as you age, that's the biggest threat to a woman when she gets in her 90s, 100 years old, is that she's going to have a bone fracture of her hip. And the best way to alleviate that is to get the right minerals. Hormones also play a big role in that, but minerals are important. And the two big ones are magnesium and phosphorus, especially in that ratio, which is good not only for that, but it's good for teeth. Chocolate's amazingly good for teeth. Even the sugarized chocolate has been tested against people's dental health and been found to be better than if they didn't have it. Even the sugar garbage, right? You can imagine if you have the real chocolate products that have no sugar and no chemicals in it.
Yeah. So even if you look for a chocolate bar and it says 80% cacao, is that good enough, or is it just pure? You want the pure stuff, the pure cacao powder, the nibs, the cacao nibs. How do we approach it when we're going for cacao?
Well, it's really great to do what you're doing, which is you go to the powder and you go to the butter and you go to the nibs and you go to the beans and you just experiment. So you just learn it, right? So back in the early days, we used to take the cacao beans and we used to dip them into honey and eat them. So get the original candy experience of all candy. The entire candy industry is based on two foods: cacao beans and honey.
Mm.
And to go back and just be like, well, this is what a cacao bean is with honey, and just crunching is just a completely amazing experience. And that was that first couple of years that we were really into cacao. We first cracked the secrets of it. We would drive around and we'd be dipping the beans into honey. We'd be eating like, this is crazy epic. This is so amazing. Oh my God. And crunching that together. So those experiences are very important. Eventually you go, you know what? I really want a chocolate bar because I'm on the run here and I need to get something. At that point, you want to make sure it's GMO free. You want to make sure there's no soy lecithin, zero zilcho on the soy lecithin. No soy lecithin. You want to make sure it's dairy free because most of the dairy that's being used in chocolate products is terrible quality. There's some exceptions, but for the most part, it's terrible. And it's got to be organic, and you can go on and on with your quality concerns. And like Sacred Chocolate, which we've produced for 15 years, is raw, cold processed. So there's no heat involved in our processing. It never gets over 114 degrees Fahrenheit. Those are Stanford designed control mechanisms on our machine. So if the speed is going too fast of our grinders and starts to heat up, it slows it down and it modulates it to get right into that perfect temperature, usually around 114 degrees Fahrenheit.
So if it gets too hot, then it'll kill some of the nutrients, some of the minerals, or what happens?
Yeah, well, you're basically you're making the oil, you're disturbing the oils. Now, a big part of chocolate is its oil. It's magnesium-rich cacao butter or cocoa butter, which is an incredible sun protector. It's an incredible skin thing. I mean, you could just I got to just give you a hint, bro. I mean, you're at that age. Like, I wish I could be your age again. But when the ladies come after you, instead of using coconut butter, you use cacao butter. Oh. And I'm telling you, the way that affects a woman's brain compared to a man's brain is as soon as a woman smells it, instantly it's on.
The cacao butter. So you put it in your hair. Where are you putting it?
So what you're doing is you're like, hey, sweetheart, come over here and let me just massage this. This is chocolate oil. Check this out. And you just start rubbing it in. You're like, hey, smell this. Like, check this out. And then you just rub it in. You start rubbing, and you go up here. Then you just keep going.
Amazing. David, one of the things I wanted to get into was your mindset, because I know from a very early age you were surrounded by Jim Rohn, Tony Robbins, like the gurus of personal development and mindset. And you were also saying in another interview that you've always been on the winning team in your life. We can get into this later, but many people might not know you were the person that helped Novak Djokovic get back on top as the number one tennis player in the world. I wanted to learn more about your mindset, how you approach that winning mentality, how you structure your businesses, or how you structure your courses, your speaking to be the best in whatever you're doing.
I just talked to Novak the other day. We had such a great conversation, and we laughed so hard. Novak's one of my brothers. I love him so much. He's just one of my favorite people in the world, and he's really tight with my cousin too, which is great because I'm so busy with what I'm doing in the world, and I'm not the best person who, I'm not the person who like sits there and dials all my friends up every day. I'm just, quick messages. And anyway, it was wonderful to get him on the phone. He's doing great. He's gearing up for the Australian Open. Yeah. So we're wishing him the best there. He's going to kick some booty over there. But anyway, one of the ways that you develop a real way of implementing the tools of the greats, like the Tony Robbins, the Jim Rohns of the world, the Earl Nightingales of the world, et cetera, is you got to have a good team. Yeah. And one of these guys, who was it? Was one of these guys said this quote. This is a very memorable quote and very useful. You can't do it yourself, so you better have a good team. Yeah. That's a really strong statement. You can't do it yourself. You can't do everything. You better have a good team. I can't do everything, so I've got to have a good team. I've got to be able to outsource things to people. I got to be able to make sure that person can do a really good job, and I got to make sure they're trained well. So one of my best pieces of advice for young people like yourself and people around you is start to develop skills of team building, how to work with teams. Now, this came back for me, luckily, because I was always on the winning team. I wasn't always the best player. I wasn't always the guy who could score all the goals or score the touchdowns, but I was on the best team because I was good at making that team gel together, to bring the team together, because that's what wins championships. It's, even Novak, right? I'm part of his team. My cousin Shervin is part of his team. He's got a whole PR team. His wife is part of his team. It's just not him. There's a whole team there that's supporting this guy, that's making him number one in the world. So you've got to have a team around you, and you got to have, what's really amazing, and this is one of the most important things, is as a man, you've got to have women who are there to support you, because that combination of those two forces, the male and female, is really helpful at developing good teams. So one of these things of like our culture or whatever, they're like, you got to hire more women, or, that kind of stuff. It's like, of course you do, because you can't build a good team without that diversity. So I like that. That really is a thing that I found to be very helpful. It's one of the reasons why people who are into business tend to be like more on the liberal side, because you have to be able to get along with people.
Yeah.
You have to be able to get along with people. You have to know how to deal with people of different genders, different races, gay people, straight people. We had wonderful teams over the years, and I've had wonderful businesses that consisted of everything, every race, every gender, every sex preference, all that stuff. And we all got along, and we were able to really kick butt. And so that's a real strong message. It's one of the things actually that I think is so wonderful about America. I mean, it's being exploited now. They're saying, now, you're a racist, or you're this, or it's just all BS. They're just trying to gain power by exploitation. In reality, if you just come back to sensibility, you're like, we've got amazing things in America, and that we've got all these people with these different skills. There's a Black woman who's a really good friend of mine, and I really want to hire her. She works in a hospital now. She's a head nurse of a hospital, but one day she's gonna be working for me. She's just got this. She's just incredible. I mean, if somebody walks in, to your office and they run into her, and she's the head receptionist, she's the best ever. And there's just, you got to find those right roles for those right people. And I think about it even years in advance. Even though I've known her for 10 years, in my back of my mind, I'm like, one day she's going to be my head receptionist. She's going to be the gatekeeper. She's going to be the person at the front, because she's badass at that. And one day she will be, I guarantee you. But that's how you got to think about your life. You can't just think like this year or next year. You got to long-term plan, and you also long-term coach people to come into position in the right role with you. I had a business partner for probably maybe 8 or 9 years in a small business. And eventually that business, we did very well as a small business, but eventually this other business that I had fell apart. I had a business partner who was other than honest. But then we had this other thing. Happens. But as that went out, then this business partner that I had a small business with, suddenly we were able to grow a big business together. And I'd always been wanting to get into business on a bigger scale with him for 8 or 9 years. Right. So in the long-term picture, sometimes it all comes about, and like all of a sudden the timing is right, and suddenly it comes together. So when I'm dealing with people, I always see them as positions in our organization, as something also that's good for them and in their evolution that fits for them. That's team building, bro.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's super valuable to especially our audience. I'm in business school right now, and a lot of people that are listening are also studying business. And one of the things that's most impressive is that you were able to take your passion, something that you lived for, and you've made countless really successful business out of it. I mean, you were the first person to put superfoods on the internet. You've been able to hack the social media metrics and grow your platform to over 12 million followers on Facebook. When you're approaching a business and combining it with a passion, what advice would you give to someone?
Great question. Well, one thing is you got to be committed. If you're doing what you love, you're committed. And that's the thing about what you love, is you're committed to it. Doesn't matter what happens. I don't know if I was making no money, I'd still be doing what I'm doing. I have made for many years as an entrepreneur, you can get into serious financial troubles where you'll be working for everybody else in your organization or on your team, but you're not putting any money in your own pocket. And that can go on for years. And that happened to me for years, where I was broke, but I was still keeping that business alive, keeping everybody employed, and still had people. This is another thing you have to deal with as an employer, is still you'll have people backstab you. They have no idea what you're sacrificing for them to keep their job in place. But I digress. That's something else. The key is that you have to have total commitment. And that means that you're at some level always engaged in it. If you're someone like me, I have a mind that's very good for social media. I'm a very good multitasker. Now, that's usually not something that men are good at. It's usually something that women are good at. And that's why women are very good at social media. Almost all the social media sites are run, if it's somebody like has a big, like say, whatever, it's the White House or whatever it is, some big organization. The social media is almost always run by women because women have a multitasking brain. As an entrepreneur, you need to have a multitasking brain. As a social media expert, you need to have a multitasking brain. So I'll procure content and be like, this goes there, that goes here. Wait, that connects to that. That's got to go there. I'll put those two things and they're going to go right there. And so it's kind of like you have to have that kind of a brain for it. Now, let's say you don't have that kind of brain. Then you need to put the focus in what you do have a brain for. Not everybody can dominate social media because you have to have a certain type of skill set. You have to have a certain type of you have to have a proclivity. And if you don't have that, it's not a big deal. But go with what you are good at. And luckily, as social media came alive, and I was just fit right into it. It was a stroke of luck, really.
Yeah, that's amazing. One of the things that I also wanted to ask you about was that I was watching your newest documentary on Iceland last night. I really loved it. The production quality, everything was really amazing. But one of the first things you said in the beginning of the documentary was that you were tapped into this magical reality. And a lot of younger people like myself are searching for that magical reality, and they try to seek that in psychedelic drugs or anything from that alters the mind. I wanted to ask you, what do you mean by this magical reality? How do you experience it, and how can you invite someone into that reality?
Well said. Thanks for that question. So that's in my film, Iceland 1111, or 1111 Iceland, if anybody wants to check that out. And one of the things that was just a gift from the gods, right, early on, is I got into fasting. I got into cleansing and fasting and colonics. I was 23 years old. I mean, I came off the normal everyday diet. I was vegetarian at that point, but I didn't know. And it was just a wonderful experience to get into the fasting and cleansing. It was really the experience of fasting on water that started cluing me into like the magic of the trees around me, the magic of the animals that lived in my neighborhood, the magic of the things that people don't see that are happening at 4 a.m, but I'm up and I'm out in the neighborhood. Because when you're fasting, especially on water, you got to go through the cleansing process. You got to clean the bowels out so all that waste is out, so you're not bathing in your own waste. But eventually what happens is you start to clue into like whoa, you have more energy, so you're like up at 4 a.m. You're like, let me go for a walk at 4 a.m. Let me see what's going on in this neighborhood. And there'd be like raccoons out. I remember one time coming up the street and I look over and there's like kind of an inset staircase, so you can't see the staircase as you're walking up, but right when you get to it, you can see it. And there was a raccoon sitting there, like eating something on the stairs. It looked like a little kid. I was like, whoa, like right next to me.
Yeah.
This is the magical part of life. Anyway, that's what opened me up to it. Now, people will get intimations of that from experiences with magic mushrooms or ayahuasca or other psychoactive plants and brews like that. And that opens you to it. But let me get down to what I think this world really is. This world that we're living in is not some kind of mathematical equation. It's not run by mathematical equations. It's run by certain types of algorithms, yes, but there's also irrational algorithms running everything. So, for example, the sun and the moon, their patterns don't exactly match up. In fact, they relate to each other as an irrational number, meaning that they don't exactly sync up. That's why we don't go totally with the solar year or totally with a lunar year. We have to have a leap day in there. We have to constantly adjust our calendar, because there's an irrational number built in that's a run-on number. That's what's running our reality, the irrational number. Like pi. Pi is 3.1415926535897. It goes on infinitely. And to my mind, my experience and what I've learned is that it's the irrational number that's bleeding energy into this reality. It's actually driving off entropy. It's bleeding in energy into this dimension. This energy is magical, of a magical nature. When we go, no, but science, what about science? Science is everything. It's like, no, actually, when you really dig into science, you're really almost always talking about engineering. You're not talking about science. You're talking about we were able to engineer something. We were able to create a motor that works. We were able to create a dynamo that works or something like that. That's engineering. It's not the scientific method. So people will get drawn into, oh, no, our engineering's good. Therefore, we live in a scientific world, and therefore everything's scientismic. But ultimately, it isn't. Ultimately, what underlies everything, all of our reality, is the hum of the irrational, the improbable, the hypersynchronistic, the unusual, the strange, the bizarre. Now, that's a mindset that takes in the totality. The scientism tries to exclude certain phenomenon that it can't explain and say, oh, no. We're trying to get to the whole, but we're going to exclude that data. And we're going to exclude this, or we're going to exclude that because it doesn't fit. We can't look at that, so we're going to exclude this. And that's the religion of scientism that we're in right now. It's excluding, yet telling us it's trying to get to the whole. Those are in conflict with each other. We can't exclude any data. And by taking in all data, including data that doesn't fit, doesn't make sense, is irrational, then we start to go, oh, we're in a magical reality that ultimately only makes sense by the meaning that we bring to it. Now, one of the best ways to tune into that is to get into nature more, to be in wild places by yourself more, to be up at strange hours like 3 or 4 in the morning, walking in your neighborhood. Do that more by tuning in with the wild animals in your neighborhood and be like, what's going on here? Do that more. Growing plants and kind of tuning in with the nature spirits and elemental beings more often. And that's where the real life is. But that's not, there's nothing unusual about that. That's just what's here already. That's just the state of nature. It's just all the stuff that's been imprinted on top of us. Oh, no, scientism. Oh, no, you have to think this. Oh, no, here's got to be your worldview. Oh, here we're going to get to the whole, but we got to exclude all this stuff over here. All of that stuff, eventually you drop away from it. You're like, oh, let me just get back to what's already here, the magical reality.
Yeah. It's like you start observing the Matrix. You start observing that you're in this type of, I love that movie, The Matrix. And I've heard you use the term a couple times. And I wanted to ask you, why do you think that us humans are so attached to order, and we build all our systems, all our paradigms to fit into a structure, an order? And I wanted to get into that a little bit, and maybe your definition of the Matrix, because I've heard a lot of different people give it a different definition. I wanted to know yours first and foremost.
Well, definitely the matrix we're living in is a scientism matrix for sure. Algorithms, you're going to figure out everything. Mathematics is going to figure out everything. We get enough data on you, we can figure out everything you're going to do. Everything's hyper rational and rationally described. There can't be anything irrational happening because that doesn't exist. We got to get rid of that. There can't be ghosts or goblins or ghouls or there can't have ever been humans and dinosaurs living together. We need to get rid of that evidence. That can't happen. We got to stay right in here in this hyper rational materialism. Now, the reason why we're in that is a very, very good question and very difficult question to answer. I suspect that what's going on is it's a swing that happens in each epoch of the human experience. So this epoch that we're in right now, say the last 10,000 years, since whatever catastrophe destroyed the Great Pyramids, the fall of Atlantis or whatever that was, we have evidence that there was great civilizations all over the world that were highly advanced and technological. That was destroyed, and that I've seen so much evidence of that in Peru. It's not even funny. And that they were not even us. They had different shaped heads. They were a different race of hominoids, or, our souls inhabited different, like Atlanteans.
Lemuria.
Yeah. Like Lemuria, right. Lemuria was even before Atlantis. Anyway, in our epic, this is my take on why we're so hyper, I would say, Ahrimanic or rational or scientismic, is because in the epic, this is the setup of our realm. We live in a kind of a Lord of the Rings type of realm, is that at the beginning of the epic, you tend towards the more irrational. That went on for the first 2,500, 3,000, 4,000 years after the flood or whatever destroyed or reset us. And then gradually you come to the middle, which is your creative center, cosmic Christ, which is the compassion, the connection to all. And then we swing too far to the other side, which is we get into the hyper rational left brain. So one way to describe it is we start out in the right brain, then we work our way to the left brain, then we have to get back to the middle. And then at the end of this epic, which will probably go down in some cataclysm, which I still think is thousands of years away, then we will be reset again, and we'll probably go through another one of those swings back and forth between the irrational and rational. Ultimately, the reality that we are in is actually both. So people are like, oh, no, it's a hologram. It's like, no, it's part hologram, it's part real.
Okay.
And what's real about it is your soul's journey. So this is the thing that's really interesting, is we're starting to get some creeping into the Ahrimanic influence or scientism influence of like people going, well, there's stuff that's happening in my life that's kind of like super coincidental, and it's like really makes it seem like we're living in a simulation. All that is a reinterpretation of that we're living in an partially irrational construct. That's what that means.
Yeah. And one of the things I had to ask you about, because I was listening with my mom the other day, we were watching the Gaia, the Conscious Life Expo that you did last year, was the 2020.
That's right, February 2020.
Yeah, and in that talk, it was like a 2-hour conversation, and I was just blown away by your order, abilities, your knowledge, everything. And in that talk, you mentioned something that I wanted to know more about, which was, you talked about the parasites, and that we're usually making these decisions, but sometimes it's not us. And I wanted to let you unveil that a bit, because I was like, wait, I need to know more about this. And let me ask him.
Okay, so this is an incredibly powerful statement that I'm going to make. It's a very, very difficult statement to refute.
Yeah.
And that is that the world is actually run by parasites, at every metaphor of what that means. And actually, according to extreme left brain thinking or extreme right brain thinking, both of those are actually parasitic, because they're not about the creative center. They're like, for example, we're thinking, oh, no, with all these computers and all these algorithms and everything, it's all going to get better. We're going to live in some kind of a utopia. But as we get closer to it, we look at it and go, this is looking more and more like a dystopia. And these people are looking more and more like parasites, because they're bleeding off the creative center, right? They're trying to draw off and control the creative forces. So the idea that parasites can influence our mind is very, very well known in my field, because we know, for example, that the demand for sugar is almost always caused by candida and parasites, and is not actually something you really want. And I know that from leading cleanses for several decades and getting people off sugar and off the things they're addicted to, off alcohol or whatever the drug is. I mean, the parasite is really what wants it, not you. Mm-hmm. And so when you do as soon as you go, oh my God, I want the sugar, then you take the parasite herbs, which work at all levels, material, physical, right? But also at emotional, mental, and spiritual. The herbs work on all levels, as long as they're not extracted and the whole herb is still there. It can be there as a powder. You can eat the whole thing whole, however you want it, but it has to be the whole thing. Can't be an alcohol extract. And then it works on, let's say, it gets the tapeworms out. And all of a sudden you get tapeworms coming out of you. You're like, what is going on? What the heck is going on? Now, having coached people through that process for decades, I know I'm not guessing anymore. I know what's going on. And that tells you a little bit about our world and what's running our world. Because as soon as a tapeworm comes out of you, your whole reality changes. Because you're like, what the heck is that? What's going on here?
Yeah.
What just came out of me? Could that thing have been controlling my consciousness? We definitely know it controls urges for certain things, like protein, heavy protein diets or heavy sugar.
Is it all in the stomach, or where else are these?
Well, parasites? we hope it's all in the microbiome, but parasites can penetrate deeper.
Okay.
Parasites can penetrate into the organs. They can penetrate into the tissue. They can penetrate into the skin, of course. So we'd love to just keep them at the microbiome level. But typically, if we're not aware of this, parasites can penetrate deeper. Now, what we do about that is we do what every creature in nature does, which we use anthelmintics, things that are dewormers. And that's just part of life. But it's in our very heavily harmonic world, which is scientism world. Oh, no, we don't have parasites. That's like Mexico or something. Oh, that's like Thailand. They don't have parasites over there. We don't have parasites here. Meanwhile, the dog's licking the person's face or, licking the person's hands, and they put their hands in their mouth. And we have to be very, very careful when we're around animals of doing that. Now, I've had people who were animal trainers for years, actually decades of their life, who finally got into the parasite cleansing, were very resistant to it, of course, because the parasites are telling you, don't do that. That's not good. Right? The parasites will try to influence you to stop you from parasite cleansing, of course. Yeah. I mean, the main thing a parasite wants is to make sure you don't even know it exists. That's its number one prerequisite. And by the way, I mean that in every metaphor of the way I just said that. Every metaphor. The main thing a parasite wants is for you to not even know that it even exists. But anyway, this gal, finally, we got her like 2 months after our cleanse was really supposed to begin. She was in my inner circle group. She started doing the parasite pills, and she got worms out of her for days. And when I mean days, I mean over 100 days, every day, worms coming out.
Holy shit.
It can be that crazy. Now, that's an unusual case, but it's not that unusual. And it's very important for people to hear this message. Now, the herbs that I recommend, I mean, the formula that I use for my people was gifted to me by an old friend of mine who he ended up passing out of this world from kidney cancer, which he battled for over almost 30 years. So through nutrition and through his knowledge, he was able to keep himself alive. And unfortunately, he developed that cancer when he was very young, but he kept himself alive for many, many years following. And he gifted that formula to me. And the main 4 ingredients, actually the main 5 ingredients, are cloves, which are they come from a tropical tree. Cloves, we've all had probably cloves or clove oil, and they're really good for your teeth, and they're very good against worms. Black walnut hull. So if you know what a walnut looks like, around the walnut is a black material when the fruit ripens, and the walnut's actually the nut. It's the seed of the actual fruit. Inside the fruit, it turns into a black material, which is an extremely good dewormer. And then the other one being wormwood, which is a type of artemisia. So those 3 are really good: cloves, black walnut, wormwood. And then we add chanca piedra, which is a Peruvian herb, which helps to break down calcification. So a lot of these organisms, once they realize they're under attack, they'll shell themselves off with a biofilm or a calcium shell to try to shield themselves from the herbs or from the attack. And so we'll use that one. And then we also will use one more thing, which is enzymes. I'm a big fan of enzymes. And so we have enzymes in our formula. And that's a good formula. That gets the major part of the job done. If you want to get more specific, sure, we can get more specific and go deeper. But I'll do that formula. Like this last year, I did 3 months of that. Typically in a year, I'll do 3 months is usually what I do. Yeah. And then I won't do it the rest of the time. But I'll make sure I go through a good habit of getting them in every day with my food, so those herbs are going through my body. Not alcohol extracts. They have to be powders. They can either be raw powders, you just shove them down and drink, or you put them in capsules and take them.
Amazing. And for someone young, I know that you were getting into all this stuff around 19, 20 years old, and you were at this peak moment where it was like the best health, optimal health, and you were doing all these things, raw vegan diets. I wanted to leave our audience with like a toolkit that you could recommend to have the best day ever, have the best health ever. Where can they start? What should they start putting into their life on the daily basis to reach these peak states, see that magical reality, see beyond the matrix? Where do we start?
Okay, one of the best ways to start is to go organic and eat organic food, or better, you can always go to farmers markets. If you're on a budget, you're in school or something, go to farmers markets. You can get crazy organic food for cheap prices and lots of it. That's what I did when I had no money. When I was 23, I would go to orchards and pick all the fruit they couldn't sell. I would go to the health food store and say, hey, anything you guys are throwing away, just put in a plastic bag, leave it behind like a trash bag, leave it in the back of the health food store, and we'll come by and pick it up. Literally, it got to the point where the guys would come at 7 p.m., an arm would come out the back door with a trash bag. We'd be driving by in the car. A friend of mine, Caleb, he would reach out with his hand, grab the trash bag, and we'd literally bring it into the car and be full of like cabbage they couldn't sell, lettuce they couldn't sell. And we'd go home and juice it. We'd go back and juice it. And back in those days, actually, when I was that age, it was so crazy because I also was very much into the bowel cleansing, also making sure I'm drinking pure and clean water, not tap water, but water that is free of contaminants, and getting lots of sun. You reminded me of something that was really a big part of my life from like 1993 to 1998. I was one of the healthiest, maybe the healthiest person on earth. It was crazy what was going on. Absolutely berserk. And then things happen to you, tragedies happen in your life or something. And, that's part of the life process. And, you're also at that peak age. I was at that peak age. And so, if you've been through traumas and stuff, you can get yourself super healthy. But if you are like your age and you're doing what I'm saying, especially with the bowel cleansing and getting on the organic food and just stay on the superfoods and making sure you're getting sun every day and fitness, you could literally become the healthiest person in the world.
Yeah. Hmm.
And what that is and what that means and what it feels like, I literally felt like it was just I don't know. I have to get back into that thought pattern where I was at that moment, but I was like,
it's like abundant energy. Or
yeah. I just was like, I'm in the peak of my life, and I knew I was in the peak of my life.
Yeah.
And so I was lucky that I got that in, for those about 5 years. And then, things happen, tragedies happen in your life and certain things happen. And, and you're not also in the peak moment, you're past your, say, your Saturn return, 28, 29 years of age. And, your life goes on. But if I know how to get back there at any time, and I do get back there at least 3 times a year through the fasting, through the water fasting, is typically how I do it now. And I prepare my body 2 weeks before, and then we go into the week-long water fast. And that's part of a group cleanse that I'll lead. So whenever I lead a cleanse, I also do it myself. And in 2020, we did 3 of them. Probably in 2021, we're going to do 3 of them. And for sure, the next one's going to be, I think, March 11th, it will kick off. And it's a 21-day process.
So you're fasting for how long? And what are these benefits when you're fasting?
Okay, so you're preparing your body for 2 weeks. So the way we lead a cleanse is you do the first week, you're going to go down to 1 solid meal. The rest can be liquids. It could be soup. It could be juices. It's going to be vegan, though. It's going to be vegan. And we're going to bring the calories down through that week. The second week, we go on all liquids, but we're still bringing the calories down. So by the time we land on day 15, with the calories have come so far down that we're ready, and then it's easy to go into the water fast.
Yeah.
And we've also done at least 2 colonics leading up to that point, or at least 5 or 6 enemas, depending on what you have available. So that means you got to, sometimes you have to pull the plug on the bathtub and get the dirty water out. And that's where the colonics come in and the enemas. It's a whole ordeal. I remember going to my first colonic when I was 23, and I was like, this is totally crazy. This is totally nuts. What am I thinking? But then you get used to it. Then suddenly it's an easy thing. And then eventually you start to realize, whoa, it's really difficult to cleanse your body without the colonics, because a colonic is like 20 bowel movements.
Wow.
It's like you get emptied out, and then it becomes easier to do the steps in week 1, and then you get emptied out again in week 2. By the time you get to week 3, let's say you do a colonic on that first day of the water fast, you are emptied out. And so the demands of all the parasites and the critters and what's in your blood is much lower because you've emptied yourself out. There's not a lot in there. You also lose weight, and it's a great way to lose weight. Then you're ready for the water fast. Then you just start into the water fast. Now, I've been doing this for so many years that I'll just do that week-long water fast, sometimes 8 days, sometimes 9 days, sometimes 10 days, sometimes 12 days. I'll do it sometimes longer, but it's always at least a week. And then I'll just keep going with my normal life, but I just won't be eating.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm hitting the magical reality big time.
Yeah. On this podcast, actually, it's so interesting because we had on John Gray, the author of Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. And we interviewed him and he was on a 9-day fast, water fast. And we went on we recorded, it was a 2.5 recorded and then a 3-hour conversation. And he had so much energy. I'm like, he has not had food in his system for 9 days. Like, what is going on there? How is that possible?
One of the greats that I learned from, and I learned from the greats, and luckily I was in San Diego when I got into all this, and I had access to the Price Pottinger Nutrition Foundation and all their great books, and I got access to Arnold Ehret's mucusless diet healing system and his book Rational Fasting. And in there, he proposes a theory which is definitely real, which is if you get everything out of your system and you get your microbiome balanced, your microbiome will form all the vitamin C and B vitamins, everything else you need. Your body is actually a perfect organism. And once you stop stimulating, as long as you nourish that balance, you make sure you have water and salts and electrolytes, eventually you get your whole humming community of cells vibrating correctly. You don't need food. You don't need anything. You're creating your own food. And so all of a sudden you have more energy. It's crazy. It's the best ever, actually. One of the biggest problems that I have with fasting for sure is I have too much energy.
Wow.
Because I can't eat anything to knock myself out. So I can be, especially when I get into day 6 or 7 or 8 into a water fast, I'm up for 23 hours of the day. I
Wow.
mean, I
Your
only need
body
an hour of
doesn't
sleep.
doesn't need sleep
You
at
don't
that
need
point.
sleep. No, all you really need is just get inverted, right? So that's what the yogis were onto. All you need to do is get your hips and your heart and your legs up and your head and your heart down. So your hips and your legs up, sorry, and the heart and head down. So you get
Mhm.
inverted, and then within an hour, you're completely rejuvenated, because that's really the key of all, by the way, all physical fitness rejuvenation. Let's say you're an athlete. Let's say you're someone like Djokovic. You have to get inverted, or at least horizontal, a good part of the day in order to get everything. You every time you're up and you're moving, you're adrenalizing.
Mm.
That's one of the main things about the human bodies. We stand up. We're not like a dog. We're not like a bear. We're standing up all the time. We have a totally different adrenaline system because of that. And as soon as you invert yourself, you shut it off.
Mm.
Now, adrenal chemicals like androstenedione, that's a high cost molecule. It
Yeah.
takes a lot for your body to keep pulling this molecule up. And so that's why as soon as you get inverted, your body goes, oh, we don't have to produce this molecule. We don't have to deal with a 4 or 5 times more androstenedione than an animal that goes horizontal, right? We don't have to deal with that now. Suddenly we can take a break.
Okay.
And this liberates a lot of energy and rests you. It brings you into a state of rest. So a lot of times I will meditate when I'm fasting, inverted, upside down. No kidding. I will meditate upside down. I could do it. I'm looking at this right here. I'm looking where I'm sitting right here. Typically what I'll do, let me just show you. I'll take, like, see this pillow here? I'll put this pillow like this. I'll
Yeah.
put my hips right here, and I'll put my legs up on that wall, and my head will be down here on this couch below. So it's I'm inverted, right? Where the hips
Mhm.
are up here, my legs are up there, but my body and head is below all of that. And I've used that extensively when I was traveling, and like, I had to catch a flight. I got 2 hours to sleep. How am I going to be well rested? I just invert myself like that, meditate for 2 hours. I'm up. I'm able to do it. It's a super key tool to having more energy. Invert yourself.
Yeah. This might be a little random question, but what do you think about the whole biohacking movement? Because I know you've kind of been a biohacker in the sense of a word since 2 decades ago. How do you see this movement is transforming, and what are some of the things from that movement that we can actually like extract and start implementing?
Well, my house is like a biohacking lounge. So I think here in
Mhm.
Texas, I'm going to open up a biohacking lounge where we have the things that I've really loved over the years that have been very helpful for me. Like, I have pulsed electromagnetic field mats, which are very good if you're an athlete and you want to recover very quickly. You can do crazy things with those mats where, like, for example, one time I hiked all the way into the center of one of the Hawaiian Islands and then all the way out in one single day. And it was like 16 hours of rough hiking and climbing and that kind of a thing, kind of out of nowhere, it's out of the blue. Your legs are, you're just completely sore top to bottom. You lay on that mat for 24-minute cycle and then another 24-minute cycle, you're perfectly fine. It relaxes all through an electromagnetic field pulsation, pulsed electromagnetic field devices, PEMF devices. It completely relaxes all your tissue. All of a sudden, all the lactic acid's gone. Things like zappers, that's my personal zapper right there, which I should
Yeah.
probably put on. There you can see it's beeping right there and on.
Mhm.
And that's another tool, biohacking tool. There's tremendous things to be said about colonics as being a biohacking tool, and there's tremendous thing to be said for certain other devices like that. For example, a yoga swing. So that automatically inverts you. It makes it easy to invert, makes it easy to get your legs up and your head down. And it goes on and on and on. So that's kind of my house is. Infrared sauna is a biohacking tool. Now, I'm not like all the way in super left brain, like, okay, I'm going to check my watch and make sure I biohacked 10,000 steps. And then I got to, check this thing. That's getting a little bit, to me, to my mind, that's just too harmonic. It's too left brain. It's too much. And that's where the biohacking community kind of goes off the deep end because they just go super nerd on that type of stuff. But the tools of the trade of the biohacking world are phenomenal.
Amazing. I wanted to start wrapping this up because I know we've taken some of your time and you've given us a lot of wisdom, like a lot of takeaways from this conversation. Before we get into that, where can people find you and what are you up to these days? I know you just moved to Houston, setting up businesses there. What are you up to these days? What can people expect from David Avocado Wolfe? Where can they find you, etc.?
It's right on. Thank you. I'm very excited to be in Texas, and I'm very excited to continue with my business, which is, it's really a rehash of my original business, which was the first business, put superfoods on the internet. We invented that idea. That's like so amazing to see what happened to that idea over the last 25 years. It's just incredible. And so I'm back in that business and I'm loving it so much. So what I'm really focusing on is, because now I have no business partners, and that's really a very good way to make sure you don't get, things stolen. And I don't know if that's ideal for everybody, but I've been through many different businesses with many different business partners. I still have a few business partners in smaller businesses, and I love them. And we get along really great. We work together for years. But sometimes when a business gets real big, that person's personality, who you're a partner with, can change. And it does change typically for many people. So you may want to consider developing a business without a business partner, or with one, somebody who has complementary skills. It's up to you. At any rate, this time I don't have a business partner, so I'm able to really focus on every piece of it. So one of the things that's really in my mind and heart right now is developing really a world-class shipping system. And I'm very excited about it. I'm thinking about it every day, and I want all my products, and anybody who wants me to ship products for them, we're going to have a world-class shipping system. And that's what I'm up to. If you want to find me and what I'm up to, the best way is you can just hit davidwolfe.com, DAVIDWOLFE.com. And that kind of gets you into my world a little bit. I have 4,000 blog entries on that site. So wow. It'll get you some interest. It's more from stuff that was from a few years ago, but although we update it regularly, we do update it regularly to keep it up to date as best we can. It's a lot of work, but we do get that done. And then you can go to thebestdayever.com, all four of those words together, thebestdayever.com. And that'll give you a little insight on my inner circle. And then if you go to links, thebestdayever.com/LINKS links, that'll kind of plug you right into like what's happening right away, like where I'm at day to day and what's the latest and greatest. If you want to join our cleanse, for example, that's where you're going to find that out.
Any upcoming books? Are you writing now, or?
Well, my art pieces every day are my social media sites. So I'm working this is how hardcore I am, bro. Like I work Telegram Messenger, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Gab, Parler, MeWe, and YouTube and BitChute all by myself. Yeah. Every day.
And trying to deal with the censorship, all this, which is a whole nother episode.
That's a whole nother episode. Yeah. I mean, I don't put my heart and soul into the censorship media anymore, just so anybody's wondering like, hey, should I put my heart and soul into Twitter or Facebook? No, you shouldn't. Get onto platforms like Gab or Telegram that are uncensored and uncontrolled. And so that way your real heart and soul stuff is there. That doesn't mean you don't use Telegram or Instagram. It doesn't mean you don't use Facebook. Just don't put your heart and soul into that, because they could take it away. They control it. They've already shown that they control it. And they're not very friendly in that regard. So, be smart about it.
Amazing. So we got a couple of wrap-up questions that go along with the whole concept of the podcast. The question that I want to ask you is, what in your life is it that ignites the flame within or allows you to tap into that energy, which we've said are the untapped sources of internal energy that allow humans to unveil extraordinary mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual capabilities? What is that in your life?
Well, one of them is this right here. I'm a drummer, so I'm constantly, having really a humbling experience going through and learning the different books and drumming. I've gotten to that point where I've been playing long enough. I'm like, I should go back, because I learned from hearing. I never had a teacher. So I'm like, I should go study the books. I got to actually learn traditional grip, not just the match grip, right? So match grip is like that with your left hand. Yeah. And this is match grip like that, right? So now I play traditional grip. And I had to learn all that stuff. So when I'm in drumming, and you have to be right in the beat, you have to be right in the rhythm, you're in a meditation, you're in the energy. And I could play for hours and have more energy. People are like, how could you just be going at it like that intensely for hour after hour? And it's like, what's going on? It's like, well, because the flow state, you're in it, you're in the meditation, you're inside the beat. You can't miss a note. That's how music is. And especially for the drummer, you got to be right inside that. So that's one of the ways that I tap into that. And Also, I love, and it just, super am into the stick tricks, right? Which is that kind of stuff, all this stuff.
If you're just listening to this, you have to hop on the YouTube.
Right.
David is just doing some Jedi tricks with this.
Right. And so this is my martial arts, actually, right? This is my martial arts. I started out with nunchucks when I was a kid, but this is in this particular case, these are big. Like, look at my finger in comparison, right?
Yeah,
so if you hit somebody with that, this is a weapon, a major weapon. So that's, I'm never going to be a jujitsu master. I have friends who are that, but I'm not going to be that.
Yeah.
And so this is also my self-defense, system. So it's my martial arts. And that's how I look at it. And this is like this part of my life, the music part and the martial arts part really is just, I love it. I get so much energy from it. And I'm not the best in the world, but I'm getting better all the time and it's fun.
Amazing, David. And the last question, promise this is the last one. We want to ask, what are your final nuggets of wisdom for anyone our age to really start creating this great awakening, this golden age that we've so much heard of what's happening in our planet right now? What would be your final nuggets of wisdom for anyone to start creating that amazing reality that we're going towards?
In the world that we live in today, financial freedom creates freedom, and it creates the freedom for you to do what you love. So make sure you got a good business, you got a good business sense, or you partner with people who have a good business sense, and you develop a strategy for financial freedom. That ultimately comes down to three things. One is you've got to be able to, really four things, which is you got to be able to live off of 70% of what you make. You got to be able to save 10%, you got to give away 10%, you got to invest 10%. So out of $1, 70% is what you live on, or 70 cents. And 10 cents is given away, 10 cents is saved. I put that savings into gold, silver, and Bitcoin, by the way, that I possess, not that somewhere else, but I actually have it. And then 10% is invested into, I usually invest in my own company, my own businesses. And that's what I recommend for people. So you got to make sure you have a financial plan, because it's number one cause of stress, right? It's your family and finances. Those two things are the biggest causes of stress in your life. So get those under control. And then once you got that under control, then you really have to dive into what your mission is here on earth. And of course, you want to combine that. You want to make sure that your family, your finances, and your mission are all together as one. Yeah. And if you got that all together as one, and you got it all, you got your whole family on board with you, you got your wife, girlfriend, significant other, husband, whatever, with you, and you guys are charging ahead with the mission, there's nothing that can stop you ever.
Yeah. So I'm going to break my promise about the last question. What is your mission?
My mission is to make foods, superfoods, super herbs, living water, and all advanced healing technologies a choice for every human being on earth.
I love that, brother. Thank you so much, David, Avocado, Wolfe. I'm really grateful and honored to share this conversation, this space with you. You blew my mind, and you will continue to do it as I dive more into your work, which I've only scratched the surface, really. And I really recommend anyone to just take a deeper look onto what you've done, what you've built. It's really extraordinary what you've done in this world and what you will continue to do. And I just want to praise you for that. And thank you so much for your time.
Right on. Thank you so much. And to everyone out there, all I've done is just keep, stay focused, keep working, keep innovating, reinvent yourself, and have a good time while you're at it too, because today is the best day ever. It's not tomorrow. Tomorrow's never going to arrive. It's not yesterday. Yesterday's gone forever. Today's all we got. Let's make it the best ever.
Yes. Thank you, brother.
Thanks, bro.